All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Fusion Friday. My name is Alex Alvarez, application engineer here at KETIV Technologies. So happy Friday, everyone. Thank you all for joining today and tuning in to today's webinar. We have something a little bit different today. So we are going to be talking about just a few reasons to switch to Fusion 360 from Mastercam. So we might ruffle some feathers here a little bit, but again, we'll just deal with the repercussions at a later time. So again, if you're coming from a different CAM software, or maybe you're currently using a something other than Fusion 360 to program your parts, this is going to be a great introduction into some of the reasons why I personally think that Fusion 360 is more than capable of handling some of the challenges that you might put it through. So again, if this is your first time with us, welcome. We're happy to have you guys. Like I said, we have a series of webinars about once a month where we talk about the different workflows or the different environments that Fusion 360 has to offer. Now, it doesn't just cover manufacturing. It covers everything from design. It covers simulation, data management as well, generative design, right? So all the different tools, all the different technologies that are built into the software, we tend to cover those here inside of the software. So a little bit about myself before we get started. So like I said, I'm an application engineer here at KETIV. I've been with the company for about 4.5, probably 5 years now. My role or my specific key area of expertise is going to be in manufacturing. So whenever a customer needs help with training, consulting, and mentoring around the manufacturing tool sets that Autodesk has to offer, that's pretty much where I come in. So again, a little bit about my experience. I do come from a Mastercam background. I've actually used it I probably started using it back in high school. My dad is actually a pretty diehard Mastercam user as well. So again, I'm not knocking any software here. I'm not here to say that that Mastercam isn't a great tool or anything. It's been around for some time, and it's obviously been around for that long for a specific reason, right? So again, hopefully you guys pick up a thing or two here with Fusion 360. Like I said, if you guys have any questions, if you guys want to maybe talk, after the webinar, feel free to ping me. I am going to leave my contact info here for you guys. So again, I'm happy to chat about anything in the manufacturing tool set collection that Autodesk has to offer. So let's go ahead and jump in with today's presentation. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to be talking about is going to be the integrated data management CAD and documentation that's built into the software. Now, again, I'm going to be switching back and forth between Fusion and the PowerPoint slides just to kind of show you guys a little bit of Fusion 360 for those of you guys that are brand new to the software. So again, Fusion 360 not only has a full suite of manufacturing tools, but it also has design, modeling, simulation tools, right? It has generative design. It has some of the data management tools here that we just talked about earlier. So it has a lot of different capabilities that are built into the software. If you guys are doing some pretty extensive fixture designs, or maybe you guys are doing some R&D work where you guys need to maybe make some small tweaks here and there to get your part to work properly, Fusion is going to be a great tool because again, all of that information is going to be living inside of the same software. Now, what does that mean exactly? That means that you don't have to worry about exporting, right? Because if you guys recall, if you export out your toolpath or if you export out your model or your data, what does that mean? You have to restart from scratch when it comes down to programming. Now, obviously, you can get by creating templates, or you can get by maybe trying to save the toolpaths, or if you have roughly the same geometry. But if you make a pretty drastic change, that means that the programmer who spent countless hours programming the part has to start from scratch every single time. Now, apart from starting from scratch and alleviating some of the export issues, what Fusion also has is what we call direct edit modeling. Now, again, if you're coming from a pretty large engineering company, you'll know that these changes don't quite often happen, right? So what I mean by that is that there's a pretty extensive process to do an engineering change order. So again, if you're working more on let's say on a smaller shop, and you have a customer that maybe called you super last minute and told you, hey, we need to make a small tweak to this pocket, right? It just needs to come down, or it needs to be smaller by, let's say, 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. Without them having to resend you the part, you can actually make that change yourself. right? Now you're probably asking yourself, well, what if they sent that part with through SolidWorks, or what if they sent it with Creo or NX, whatever the other CAD softwares that they use? You have what we call AnyCAD technology, right? So you can Fusion 360 recognizes the kind of data that's being imported. It's not going to recognize the features, but you can modify any feature that model has. And I'll make sure to kind of show an example of an example of that here in a bit. Right, so that's direct edit modeling. That's more on the 3D side. If we go and transition back over to the CAM side of things, a lot of programmers here would know that to get the toolpaths to work properly, or to kind of do exactly what they want the toolpath to do, sometimes it's going to take a little bit of tweaking. Right, it's going to take a little bit of tweaking inside of the toolpath, but it's also going to take a little bit of model updating. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say you were trying to machine out, a pretty organic surface, such as this one here. If you want to machine that surface, granted, you're going to want to maybe extend these edges a little bit, right? Extend the edges just a bit, just so that the tool has enough clearance to kind of go past that surface and leave you a nice crisp edge here at the bottom. Now, if you're working strictly in a CAM software, you might be able to do that. It might take a little bit longer. You might have to create reference surfaces, or maybe even, God forbid, create the little profile that you see there to match the actual profile of the surface. Now, inside of Fusion 360, again, being that it's a CAD tool as well, what you can do is you can create a zero offset surface and then just extend that surface naturally or tangentially, right? Whichever gives you the best result. So again, that can be done in a matter of seconds without having to spend really too much time going into the details and then trying to create these reference surfaces. So again, there's so much that's built into the software, and again, it's so much more than just a CAM software. And a lot of people think, well, I'm not going to need the rest of the tools, and that's not true, right? Because you're going to need them in probably the worst case, whenever you're in a super time crunch, and whenever you actually need those tools, that's when you'll start realizing that, okay, maybe I could have used those tools, right? Or the surfacing tools, or maybe the direct edit modeling. So again, don't just knock down Fusion 360 because it's more than just a CAM tool. These CAD tools are really powerful, and when you understand to use them in the correct manner, I think it can definitely go a long way. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into the software, like I said, and then show just a little bit about the user interface. So again, if this is your first time kind of exploring Fusion 360 and seeing it for the first time, this is what you're going to get. I think for me, I have the so I do have a dark theme going on. I'm not sure if everyone has that or not, but this is how mine looks like. Obviously, yours might look a little bit different. That's okay. Still same functionality. Now, over here on the left-hand side is what we call the data panel. Right now, again, this is probably what separates Fusion from kind of the rest of the software, is that this software has its own data management built into the tool. Now, what I mean by that, right? So it is going to be a cloud-based software, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here towards the end. But being that it's cloud-based, it allows you to seamlessly access your data wherever you are, right? So again, you don't have to worry about a local folder. You don't have to worry about maybe someone not logging out of a specific account, or you don't have to worry about you logging out of your workstation and then having access to your products or your data at home. All of this is going to be connected to the cloud. So wherever you are, you can access this information anywhere. Now, over here on the left-hand side is what we call the data panel. Like I said, this is what's going to hold all of your information. Right now, you're going to have your projects. Inside of the projects, you're going to have the different models that you're working for that specific project. Now, one thing that a lot of people kind of oversee, or they're not as familiar with, is going to be this drop down here. Right now, this drop down allows you to create essentially a Fusion, what we call a Fusion team. And this, if you're working inside of a company, is huge, because again, now you have an admin that can control who has access to what data. Right. So if that's a big pain point in your company, where maybe people are having or people have access to a model that they shouldn't have, or maybe someone is changing information that they shouldn't be changing, this is again a great way to kind of handle that some of those situations. But again, it makes it unique in the sense that the tool that you're using to design and to kind of store all of your CAM information is the same tool that's managing all of the data that you're currently working on. Right. So apart from this, you can do 2D drawing documentations. If you guys are a little bit more advanced and working on like some futuristic parts. You do have generative design as well, right? So again, just some new technology that's evolving. If you guys would like to learn more, we do have more information on our YouTube channel. But this is what you get, right? So again, what I was talking about before is that we're inside of the manufacturing tab or the manufacturing dropdown, right? So this tab or this panel is going to hold all of our different manufacturing technologies or all of our different manufacturing tools. Now, right out of the box, Fusion 360 comes with 2D toolpaths. It comes with 3D toolpaths. You have multi-axis, right? And some of these other features, these are going to be paid for, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the extensions as well. But again, for the most part, everything here, everything that you see inside of the software are tools that you guys are going to have available to you when you purchase the software. You notice that we are on the milling tab, right? So you switch over to the turning, you have turning tools now. And the nice thing about this is that it's neatly laid out, right? So if you're doing milling, you're only going to be seeing milling toolpaths. If you're doing turning, you're only going to be seeing turning toolpaths. You have your inspection tab if you want to inspect maybe specific surfaces. Right? If you do on-machine verification, you can also program some of those probes in here as well. So again, some pretty neat functionality for a pretty low starting point in the software. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was we're in the manufacturing tab. If you hit the drop down, you can quickly transition over to your design tab. Right now, what this is going to allow you to do is if we were programming a toolpath, right? So let's say we were programming this part here. Right now, if you look at this part, obviously there's many different ways to kind of tackle the part. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and add a toolpath that kind of runs through the inside of the part, doing this little U shape. Now, again, if you want to extend the toolpath, you would probably have to extend the boundary. Now, what happens if you try to extend the boundary? This toolpath is going to see the surface, and it's going to see that it ends here at the bottom, right? And it can either bleed down at the bottom, or it's not going to create any toolpath at all. Now, one way to alleviate that is obviously modify the model, right? So how do you do that inside of Fusion 360? The way that you can go about that is, again, you have your 3D modeling tools, right? So you have your traditional extrudes, you have your traditional revolves, cuts, fillets, chamfers, but also on the tab, you have your surfacing tools, right? And now this is something that I normally go through in some of the trainings that we do, because your chances are you're going to want to modify your part at some point or another, right? Or modify the toolpath, and the only way to go about that is going to be to create some sort of surface geometry. Now, again, various different ways to go about it. The way that I would personally go about it is, like I said, create a zero offset surface. So if you can think of it, kind of the skin, it's going to be a skin of this surface here, and then just extend the edges naturally, right? So if you guys want to just see kind of a quick rundown of that, we have the offset command, right? And again, it's going to create a zero thickness surface. And notice that immediately when you hover over any of these surfaces, it's going to try to select the entire chain, right? So again, you have the option to either chain select or not do chain select. It's kind of up to you guys if you wanted to do the entire surface. For us, just demonstration purposes, we would probably just select this one. Notice that the distance is going to be 0 millimeters. And so this part is designed in metric. Right now that creates the surface, and it's great, but again, it still doesn't solve the problem of extending the surface outwards, right? And again, if you kind of go through here, you can see that you have some of the tools. Again, let's say that I'm not familiar with the user interface, or this is kind of my first time working with the user interface. Everyone here hopefully has some experience with AutoCAD. So if you guys do, you guys might be familiar with typing the command, right? So if you type in, let's say extend in this case, type in a command and it automatically shows up here as your shortcut, right? So really, really great tool, again, especially for people who are just starting off with the software. If they're not familiar with some of the user interface, or maybe they're not familiar with some of the commands, just go ahead and bring up this design shortcuts option, begin typing out your command, and now we can go ahead and find exactly which command we're trying to look for. Right, so we want the extend command. We want to select this edge, select this edge, and now you have that extension to allow the toolpath to kind of bleed over over to the edges, right? And obviously you can specify a specific distance so that it's not just doing some air passes there. Right, so we can go okay, go into the manufacturing tab and then set up your part so that now you can go ahead and automatically machine that surface. Right, so really great functionality. Like I said, you can switch back and forth. You don't have to export or re-import any of this. All of this information is kind of living inside of the same software. Now, the same applies to capping holes, right? So again, this is obviously something that's also a pretty big deal. If you have just a plate and a flat plate, it's really no big deal. But if you have a surface like this and you want to machine that surface, chances are if you add a toolpath, it's going to try to bleed over that hole, right? It's going to read the hole and it's going to try to go into that hole. Now, you can do the same exact thing that we just did there. You can cap the holes, right? And again, you don't have to leave the software. You don't have to re-import. And then once you create the correct toolpath, and then allow these surfaces to be kind of read by the setup, the software or the toolpath is going to automatically create the correct toolpath that we're looking for here. Right, so extremely easy to go through these workflows. Again, we have videos on all of this if you guys want to do a more in-depth video or more in-depth workflow. But again, I'm just trying to show you guys a high-level overview of some of the things that you can do inside of the software. Okay, so that was reason number one, right? Because you guys have the integrated data management, you have CAD, and then you have documentation. Now, I did mention a little bit about working in a team, right? And kind of how that works, and then managing different parts, and then managing who has access to which part. One of the things that often gets brought up when I'm kind of demoing the software and I'm talking to a team of programmers or a team of designers is how does accountability work, right? So again, maybe there's some issues of accountability at work. Maybe someone makes a modification to the part and no one takes accountability for it, or someone made a change to the part and they weren't supposed to. How do you keep track of who's making change to that part? If we take a look at the software, and this goes for new people as well, or for people who have been using this tool, if I take a look at this part, right, or some of the parts that I have open, one of the changes that Fusion 360 made recently is they actually indicate who's working on which part, right? So now, granted, this is going to be my personal project, so I'm not going to see anyone else, right? So if I take a look at the People's tab, this pretty much shows you who has access to all the parts that you're currently working on. Right, so this is kind of a neat way of seeing, okay, John Smith has access to this part, and then Debbie doesn't have access to it, whatever the case may be. Now in here, if someone is working on a part, it actually notifies you, hey, this part is actually opened by XYZ colleague, right? So it'll show you who the person is that's working on this part. Now, Fusion 360 takes it kind of one step above, and they allowed for different versions of the part as well. Now, this is where it can get a little confusing, right? Because I don't want you guys to mix revisions with versions. Revisions is an actual change into the actual revision change to the part itself. Versions, the way that I like to think of them inside of Fusion 360, is going to be as a snapshot in time, right? So this is version 1. This is the first part that was ever created, right? So I imported the part and I didn't make any change to it, right? So that's version 1 of the part. Now, let's say I make a small modification, or even if I update the color change, whatever the case may be, when I save it, what I'm doing is I'm creating a snapshot in time, right? And that's going to go up to version 2. Now, you'll see that this part has only one version. If we take a look at a different part that has multiple versions, right? So this one has 13 versions. It's actually going to show you a timeline of how many times you've actually pressed save for this part. Now, when you're doing that, you want to be careful, and you can kind of see that I haven't been doing this. I haven't been keeping up to date with this part, but you want to be careful, because when you save a part, it actually gives you the ability to add a comment to it, right? So you can see that I added a comment on 410, and then I was I wasn't keeping up with adding comments to it. So you want to make sure that you add comments, because it actually allows the rest of the users to see why you saved it in the first place, right? So in this case, I can see that I saved it because of a simulation solve. Not only does it tell you the comment, not only does it tell you the date that it was saved, it also tells you who it was saved by. So now you guys can kind of start seeing, right? If you guys are working in a pretty large team and you guys have had issues in the past of maybe someone making changes to the model that wasn't supposed to, now you can see exactly who's been updating the model at what time, and then the reason why they were saving it. One pretty neat feature about this too is that at any point in time, let's say a part was saved and it wasn't supposed to be saved, what you can do is you can actually go back to a specific version, and then you can open that version up, right? So again, you can open that version. You can promote it to be the most up-to-date version, right? So then that overrides this version 13, and then it creates the new version 14, but in reality, it's still this version that you promoted. Right. So again, a lot of functionality, and this is what I'm talking about, right? So it's not just a CAM tool; it's a tool that has CAD capabilities, and it has also data management capabilities that's built into the software. So really neat functionality. Like I said, not a lot of people are familiar with the Fusion team aspect of things. So if you guys need help, or maybe you guys are a little unclear about how to set up a Fusion team, let me know, and I'd be more than happy to kind of walk you guys and your team on how to set one of these up. Okay, so again, you can keep track of your CAD data. Again, the nice thing about being in an all-in-one platform is the CAD data that you're saving. And so the CAD data that we're currently saving here is also going to contain the CAM information, right? So you don't have to worry about managing two different files, or managing a file inside of Fusion, or managing a file inside of SolidWorks, and then managing one inside of Mastercam, and then worrying about, okay, is one up to date, or is my programming up to date? No, all of that kind of goes away, because again, inside of here, the same model that you're working on is the same model that you're adding toolpaths to, right? So any change that the model goes through is going to update your CAM program, and therefore your CAM program is going to be the most up to date as well. Now, the last thing that I wanted to share here with collaboration was going to be, or with the data management portion of things, is how do we share some of this information with our colleagues, right? Or maybe there's a vendor that wants to see the part, maybe he's creating, or they're creating some sort of tooling, or maybe the customer wants to see kind of an update on the part. What you can do is you can always right-click on your part, and you can share a public link, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and yeah, I'll go ahead and open up this bracket here for you guys. Right, and again, there's 13 versions. This part I don't think has any programming in it, but that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a public link. I'm going to share the latest version with anyone using this public link, right? So what that means is that anytime I make an update to this part, I don't have to go and recreate this link, right? This link is going to be live with this part no matter what version it's currently in. And then do you want the item to be downloaded, right? In this case, I just want you guys to take a look at it. So I don't want you guys to have access to this model. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this link. And again, while I'm going through this is probably a bad idea, but I'm going to go ahead and share this with everyone. And now you guys have complete access to viewing this model here. If you guys want to comment on it, you guys can comment on it. I believe I should be able to see the comments here at the very bottom in real time. So again, if anyone wants to try that out, I'll go ahead and give you guys some time here to test it out. But again, you guys can now access the part. You can create a section analysis. You can measure specific components. If there was a programming strategy, or if there was a CAM toolpath associated with this part, you guys would actually be able to see those toolpaths inside of the Internet Explorer, right, or the web browser. So again, you don't need to have, so the person that has access to that link doesn't need to have access to Fusion 360, because that's going to be just an interactive model, right, inside of a web browser. So really neat technology. Like I said, this is something that's new, that's a little bit modern, and it's something that eventually customers are going to start requiring from you guys, right? They want to be able to easily access some of this data, without having to purchase any additional software. All right, associative data links with AnyCAD. So I kind of alluded to AnyCAD here earlier. We have a whole webinar kind of explaining AnyCAD, because this is a pretty big topic for a lot of people. Essentially, what this is referring to is if you take a look at Fusion 360, right? So if we take a look at the software, let's say I wanted to upload a part, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and click on upload. I'm gonna go ahead and click on select files. If you guys were kind of curious in regards to what kind of file types we can go ahead and import, these are the different files that Fusion 360 can import, right? So you have your AutoCAD DWG files, your Inventor files, CATIA, IGES files, right? STL, Solid Edge, so on and so forth, right? So again, various different file types that you guys can work with. Now, again, the workflow that is required for AnyCAD, so it's not as easy as just selecting the file right now and saying, okay, I want to go ahead and insert this NX file, right? And then saying that I'm going to have the complete associative link with the software. That's not how it works. So there is an intermediate step, but like I said, once you set it up once, it should be a pretty straightforward process moving forward. So this is only if you want to have the associative data links with the other CAD software, right? So what I mean by that is, if let's say this part was imported from SolidWorks, if I wanted this part to update whenever the SolidWorks part was updated, you can have that associated link between the two models. Like I said, it's not as easy as just going into the upload and then selecting the part. There is a little bit of pre-work that has to take place in order to get that to work properly. So just be aware of that, right? So so just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of that. If you guys are coming from a different CAD software, right, and you guys are planning on leaving the CAD tool altogether, what we normally recommend is just have a little bit of an overlap period. So let's say we're coming from SolidWorks and we're using Fusion 360 as well. A month, 2 months of just overlap, and then slowly start transitioning all of your legacy data into the software here. Okay, so we also have an extensive library of free post processors. Now, this is usually a pretty big deal for a lot of customers. At least the last point that I heard of, Mastercam gave you some out of the box posts, but I think they charged you for specific post types. So if you were just on let's say on a milling module, and let's say you decided to transition or get a lathe, you would have to pay for not only that turning module, but you would also have to pay for the post processor. I might be wrong, right? So again, I'm not up to date with some of the details with Mastercam, but again, with Fusion 360, what you guys can do, and if I go back into my 3D milling part here, right? So a quick way to kind of access that, if you guys don't want to kind of leave the software here, if you go to your post process tab, you have this little blue hyperlink at the very bottom, right? And when you click on that, it takes you directly to the Autodesk post library. Now, this was a recent update. I think, I think within probably the last month or so, Autodesk actually added the entire post list to Fusion 360, right? So before, when we were inside of the software and we selected this dropdown, there was only a handful of posts available to us, right? And these are just my cloud posts, actually. So if I go to the installed post, I can go ahead and kind of cycle through some of this information. If you guys are a longtime Fusion 360 users, you guys will notice that this is actually a pretty extensive list compared to a couple months ago. And again, reason for that is because I think that Autodesk actually added the entire list that you guys see here into the software. And so again, if you guys don't see your post, what I always recommend is just go ahead and ping a reseller, right? So if you guys need help with the post, or if you guys don't see your specific machine inside of here, go ahead and just ping me or ping a reseller, and then we can obviously help you guys out with that. So whether we tell you whether there's a post available, Autodesk, what they usually do is sometimes they're testing out the post before release. So we at least have a little bit of insight as to whether a post is coming or as to whether they're developing a post for a specific machine. But again, these are all completely available to you guys. There's no price that you guys have to pay. Even if you guys weren't an Autodesk user or an Autodesk, I guess, customer, you guys have complete access to this website. Right? It's not like I need to sign in or anything to this post website. So if you guys just wanted to take a look at a post or just take a look at the post library, again, everyone has access to this library. Now, what I did is I can go ahead and download the post. I can go ahead and click on it, and it actually opens up the post inside of this web browser. So if you guys are familiar with JavaScript, this is gonna make sense to you guys. But this is one of the ways that, or this is what actually takes your tool pathing and creates readable language that your machine is going to understand. Right, so each machine has for the most part, it has the same language, but there's going to be a little bit of variance in the language there. So maybe some of the codes are different. Maybe the top section is going to require, or the header is going to require a little bit different codes than a different machine. So all of this makes sure that all of that is taken care of. Now, one of the nice things that we can do, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Is when you're inside of Fusion 360 and you post out a code, it's going to post out inside of what we call Visual Studio, right? So if you guys aren't familiar with Visual Studio, it's a kind of a great little programming add-in. So let me just find a toolpath here that's not too complicated. Post process. I'm going to go ahead and post it out with let's say a Haas machine. And again, what you guys are seeing here is you guys actually have the ability to save your custom post in a specific location, right? So you have a personal post library, and this personal post library is going to live local on your machine. But let's say we were on a team, right? We want every single one of our programmers to have access to the post that we modified. In that case, what you guys want to do is you want to make sure that you save your post to the cloud post, right? And then that way everyone has access to these posts. Now, what I always recommend is if you make a modification to a post, you have to make sure that you save it either in a personal post library or in a cloud post, right? Because if you saved it accidentally inside of your installed post library, whenever there's an update inside of Fusion, it's going to update that post as well, right? So just be aware of where you're saving the modified post there. But again, if I use the kind of the installed post there, you can go ahead and select a specific machine. Notice that there's quite a lot of Maze-X there. You have your Herco machines, you have your Haas machines. If I take a look here, we have the Haas pre-NGC. Right, I'm going to go ahead and save post it to my desktop, save this out, and then it's going to go ahead and post inside of what we call Visual Studio. Right now, reason why I bring this up, so I know I kind of jumped from modifying post to actual NC code, but reason why I bring this up is because now you can actually go ahead and open up any specific post that you've downloaded. Right, so if I go here to the file, and if I go open file, what I can do is I can go ahead and take a look at that Haas post that I downloaded. I can open it, and now I can open it inside of Visual Studio. And the reason why I bring this up is because now it's much more easier to understand, right? I mean, granted, if you understand JavaScript, obviously, but it's easier to understand in the sense that it's color coded. What I also like about this is that there's add-ins inside of Visual Studio, right? And this kind of blew my mind when I saw it, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of close this one out, right? So if you take a look at it, there's add-ins here that you can definitely start taking advantage of. Now, when you guys are modifying posts, one of the biggest things is that you guys have to debug the post, right? Especially if this is your first post that you're modifying. One of the ways that Autodesk actually makes it a little bit easier is they have this add-in, and I can go ahead and share this with you guys after the webinar. But you have the CNC selection, right? You have essentially the different strategies that you can create inside of the post. So let's say we were testing out a drilling operation, right? So we modified the post, we made a few changes. Instead of saving the post, going into Fusion and then posting out a drilling operation, what I can do is I can go ahead and take a look at the drilling section, and say, okay, we're doing chip breaking, right? So I'm going to go ahead and double click on this chip breaking strategy, and it automatically runs a chip breaking cycle, and it shows you exactly what that code will look like once you make the modifications to the post, right? So now you can quickly see, if you make a modification to the post, you can see what the code is going to look like within a matter of seconds, right? And so this is a big deal. So again, I understand if you guys aren't too familiar with modifying posts, this is probably not making too much sense. But the point here being is that you have a lot of tools, a lot of capabilities within the Visual Studio, right? And these posts, like I said, are all available to everyone. So everyone has access to modifying the post. One difference though that I do want to point out, especially if you guys have been using Fusion for some time, or for those of you that have, is if you go to the Post Process tab, and if you're working with the installed post library, you no longer have this option to open config. Right, so what this little command does is it actually opens the post processor. Again, I think Autodesk realized that a lot of people were changing the installed posts and they were breaking them, right? Or they were breaking their own posts, and then it made it difficult to kind of dissect what was going on. So instead, what Autodesk is doing now is they're making customers download the post from the website, and then that way they leave the installed post default. So that's why this is grayed out. If you guys were just wondering there. Okay, so back to the PowerPoint here, right? So again, extensive list of library. All the posts that you see there are free. The only time that you do start incurring charges is if you reach out to a reseller and you're looking for some sort of modification, right? That's the only time that the reseller can charge you. If you ever, if you're looking for an out of the box post, and it's inside of the, if it's inside of the actual website itself here, and someone's trying to charge you for it, that's a big no-no, right? So just make sure that you're aware of that. Make sure that you check the website first. Make sure that the post is there. If it is, go ahead and download it, and now you have access to it. All right. The next thing the next reason to switch from Mastercam is going to be the ease of use and consistent intelligent programming, right? So this is again kind of more of an opinion and more of a user preference. But if you take a look here at some of the little screenshots, right? So no matter whether you're doing 2D programming, 3D programming, 5-axis programming, the workflow is going to be entirely the same, right? So you're always going to have the tool tab, you're always going to have the geometry tab, heights tab, passes tab, linking tab. All of this is going to be the same no matter what tool path you're in, right? So again, what this does is it creates a consistent flow, and it allows all of your users to be familiar with the way that Fusion 360 is creating these tool paths, right? So now you don't have to guess where a specific command is at, or if you guys are transitioning from 3-axis toolpaths to 5-axis, you guys don't have to worry about new terminology or maybe new buttons here and there. All of this is going to be consistent, and all of this is going to have the same feel no matter which strategy you're currently on. So again, really, really nice. And that's one of the things that I hear the most about some of the users that have transitioned from Mastercam to Fusion is just how easy the user interface is to pick up inside of the software. Okay, so another one that I guess is going to be kind of iffy for some people is going to be the account-based access and settings. So again, Fusion 360 is going to be a subscription-based software, right? So what that means is that you pay monthly, you pay yearly, every 3 years, whatever the case may be, and then you're paying for access to that software. A lot of people get a little worried because they think that if they stop paying, they're going to lose all access to your data. That's not the case, right? Because again, you're going to have your own account. Fusion 360 is holding your account through obviously your credentials. So it's never going to delete your data. Your data is never going to, is never going to go away. I'm not sure if there's I guess a or some sort of grace period that Autodesk gives you. That's something that I personally have to look into because, like I said, I'm not too sure whether there is. But if you stop paying for your account, it doesn't mean that all of your data is going to vanish, right? So that's one thing that I want to point out. It is going to be a subscription-based software, right? And again, one of the downside to this is that people think that their data is going to get deleted, but that's again not the case. Now the upside to this, and I talked about this briefly, is that if you're at work, if you're logged into Fusion 360 and then you go home, you're going to have access to your data no matter where you're at. Right. So again, that's going to be a huge plus side, because I know some softwares allow for that, but what you have to do as a user is you have to make sure you log out. And again, if you're in a rush, or if you're, kind of in a hurry, that's sometimes the last thing that you're thinking about, right? Is making sure that you log out of your software. Fusion 360 doesn't require that. It will pick up sometimes, and this is something that I've seen personally on my end. It will pick up saying that, hey, this laptop is, it's signed in. Do you want to go ahead and log out of that one? Right. So it's automatically able to pick that up, but again, it doesn't force you to make sure that you sign out beforehand. So again, kind of a nice little deal there. And this goes for anything. So this goes for your CAD data. This goes for your CAM data, your tool libraries, right? And this is something that I've actually had to experience. I created a tool library at home, and then and that was at my desktop. I took my laptop, or I went to a customer site. I programmed the part using their machine, but with my account. Right. So again, using my Fusion 360 account. And again, it doesn't have to be the same workstation, it doesn't have to be the same computer. As long as you log in using your same credentials, you're going to have access to that data no matter where you're going. All right. This is something that maybe a lot of you are familiar with, or if you guys aren't, this is something that Autodesk is actually pretty good about. And it's going to be the seamless product updates. Now, believe it or not, and this is something that a lot of people don't believe me on, but usually every 6 to 8 weeks is when we expect some sort of update from Autodesk, right? Now, these updates can be anywhere from just a small user interface change, right? And what I mean by that is just a command change, or maybe some new functionality, or it can be as big as updating an entire, let's say, or adding an entire toolpath strategy. So if we go back into Fusion, one of the best ways to kind of have access and have visibility into what some of the future changes are going to be is by going to your profile up here at the top, going to preferences, and then going down here to your preview features, right? So for those of you guys that are brand new to Fusion 360 or the Autodesk ecosystem, what Autodesk does is they actually have what we call preview features. And all of these features are going to be essentially what we call also beta features, right? So Autodesk is testing these features, but they're not testing them kind of on their own, right? So they're not holding all of the information. What they want is for customers to take advantage, right? Test out some of these beta features, provide some feedback, and then that way they can release it, or release a more robust feature. Right. So instead of holding the feature for, let's say a year or maybe 2 years, and then releasing it out, and then maybe possibly, going through some bugs or a bug period, they actually do the beta. They let the customers test it out, and then now you guys can see exactly what's going to be released in the upcoming updates. Right. So you have intertraceable CAD points, you have live machine data connection. This is a pretty big one. You have machine builder and machine simulation, right? So again, this is going to be a pretty big deal, and it's going to be a pretty big deal breaker for a lot of people, because this is something that I've heard, across the board, that everyone wants to see incorporated into the software. So I highly recommend, if this is your first time inside of the software, if you're just starting to get going with the tool, take a look at some of the preview features, right, and see what Autodesk is doing with some of the new functionality here. All right, and then the last little point here that I wanted to point out is that you can actually transition your legacy data into Fusion 360, right? So again, this is, we're mostly talking about CAM here. So if you guys have a Mastercam library, you want to import it into the software, there is a way to do that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and kind of just show you guys how to go about it, but you do have to require some sort of an app, right? Now, to access that application, it's not too difficult. If I go back to my design tab, if I go to tools, I'm going to click this little drop down for add-ins. I'm going to go into the Fusion 360 App Store. And if I type CAM, the first app that I see is going to be this CAM tool library converter. Right, so I can go ahead and download this. Again, you do need an Autodesk subscription for this one. I take that back. You don't need an Autodesk subscription. You need an Autodesk account. You do need an Autodesk account. You need to sign in. Once you're signed in, you're able to download this. right? And if you take a look at it, you can import that tool library, select what the name is going to be. And then I think as of right now, I can only do Mastercam tool libraries. But again, point being is that you don't have to go through that pretty tedious task of, going through the tool library, matching the parameters or matching the tool parameters. Let the software kind of do that for itself, right? Or on its own. And kind of let it do the heavy lifting there. And again, that's one of the biggest things that I get, right, is that companies have these massive tool libraries and they're just dreading going through and creating these new tool libraries. So again, with this application, you no longer have to go through that. Like I said, I've helped customers create their tool libraries or manage the tool libraries. So if this is something that you guys are interested in or need a little bit more guidance on, just feel free to reach out and let me know. Again, really nice that you can transition over from Mastercam to Fusion 360 and then have the same tool library that you guys and your programmers were accustomed to. Okay, so that's pretty much what I had to share. Like I said, I wasn't trying to knock any software out, right? I'm not knocking anything down. I just wanted to kind of show some of the biggest pain points that I've seen customers have with some of the conversations that I've had with them. Right. So again, this was just a quick list. There's things from from collaboration. Another big positive that Autodesk has is that they have just so much information and they have a pretty large community out there that's willing to help. Right. So again, case in point, this webinar. So here's my contact info, guys. I'm going to take a look to see if there's any questions. I'll leave it open for just a bit here. But again, if you guys have any questions on Fusion 360, like I said, or Inventor Cam, or maybe you guys are kind of on the cusp of deciding which CAM software to go with next, let me know. I'm more than, I'm just a phone call away if you guys need any guidance on understanding our CAM software a little bit more. Okay, so I'm not really seeing any questions come through, guys. So again, thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions, like I said, here's my contact information. If there's no additional questions, I will see you guys on our next one. Thanks for tuning in.